I don't remember what day it was, maybe on a Tuesday. And we were having a Good Friday service there at this spot. And you're reading this gospel at Mass. And you're realizing, like, this is where it happened. And I broke down in the middle of that Mass.
Daniel, thanks for sitting down with us.
Absolutely. It's good to be here.
You know, it's hard to believe it's been 10 years since I got you and I into the Vatican when we went to Europe.
Yeah, you totally had all responsibility for every bit of that.
How cool is that? What a unique experience.
That the going to the Vatican and seeing all of that stuff I've been to the Vatican a few times, and to see all the paintings, St. Peter's in and of itself is just amazing. It's breathtaking to see how big and how amazing that church is in and of itself. But then to see the rest of the Vatican is just, it never gets old. Never gets old.
How big is the Vatican?
Oh, so I don't know if you guys ever been to the, it's the
It's its
National
own
Basilica.
city or country.
Yeah, it's its own country. But the St. Peter's itself is I think it is the largest church in the world, a Catholic church in the world. But if you've ever been to the National Basilica in Washington, D.C., so I always use that as a reference to people, because people in the United States have been there. That church is the largest church in the Americas, and it will literally fit inside of St. Peter's. And so if you ever go to St. Peter's, there's when you walk in, there's lines on the floor, and they list the different churches around the world that could literally fit inside St. Peter's. And if you ever see pictures of St. Peter's where along the top of the dome, there's letters. I can't remember exactly what it says, but these letters are larger than a person. I mean, but they don't look that big from the ground. It's just, it is just massive. But it is quite the sight. The sacristy in there, when you go in to say Mass, they take the priest back into the sacristy, and there's all kinds of masses going on there in the morning when you get there, and they take the priest back into the sacristy, and the sacristy itself, which is where the priest gets ready, and all of the things and it is bigger than my church. It's bigger than most churches in Wichita. Just the sacristy itself for this building. So it's just a massive building.
Do you know a lot of history of the Vatican?
I don't think I know a lot. But if you go tour the Vatican, you realize, or go tour at least St. Peter's, you realize that the history goes back far. We went on that Scavi tour. Remember that Scavi tour that we went on? So you go down underneath. You go down underneath St. Peter's, and I might get some of this information wrong, but some of it was where St. Peter's was built, because it's not like we have our cathedral here in Wichita, which is the mother church of the diocese. Everybody mistakes St. Peter's as being the cathedral church of Rome. So it's where the cathedra is, where the bishop sits. Well, that St. Peter's is not the cathedral church. It is where St. Peter was buried. And so when you go down underneath, there was always, for years, tradition just held that this is where the bones of St. Peter were at, was underneath the altar of St. Peter's. And it was just tradition. Like, there was no facts, because everybody, when St. Peter died, they were trying to, the non-Christians were trying to, like, get rid of anything that was Christian. And St. Peter was the biggest part that they were trying to get rid of, because he's the rock of the church. And so if they can get rid of him and get rid of his tomb, get where he was at, they could essentially, they were trying to eradicate Christianity. And so tradition held he was there, but there was never, over the years, it was just word of mouth. And so I can't remember when it was. It was recent. It was in this, I want to say it was in the 1960s maybe ish, that the Holy Father started excavating underneath St. Peter's, because they wanted to know there was proof that he was there. And so they started excavating in different places and different areas, and finally they got back to where they believed he was at. And they found in a box somebody had taken, and there was tradition that says where he was at, and I don't remember all the traditions that says where he was at, but there was a box they found, not in the grave they believed he was at, but right around the corner of the grave, where they believed the Christians had taken his remains and put them in this box and hid them, where only Christians really knew that where his bones were at. And so, and if you go down there now, they can't definitively say 100% that it's him, but everything that matches up with those bones are exactly as St. Peter, because they would have had no DNA per se of St. Peter, but everything is a certain age, it's a certain bone type, which is exactly as St. Peter was described. So they're like 99.9% sure these are St. Peter's bones. And if you do the Scavi tour, it takes you to the different basilicas, St. Peter's basilicas that were built over his bones. And so that's why St. Peter's is there. That's why the Holy Father's there. And that's why the Vatican City State is where it's at today, is all because of St. Peter.
Are we certain that Peter did die in Rome?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you see, you go, there's where they ran the horses on the carriages. I can't remember what they call it. There's an obelisk that was in the middle of it. It's circa something. There was an obelisk in the middle of it where St. Peter died. Well, that obelisk is now in the middle of where St. Peter is, and so they literally killed him there and then buried him in this tomb. So history tells us and everything tells us that's where he died and that's where he was. So so we're almost certain that that's where he's at. So it's just amazing to me. Like, I remember the first time I went through that tour, I was in seminary, and I had never left the country, and this was the first time I'd been. And when you go there, you have to. It's through the bishop's office that you're able to get tickets. Like, you can't just go up to a ticket counter and buy tickets to this. You have to go through the bishop's office, and the bishop's office gets you tickets to it. And so to go down there, it's a very rewarding thing or special thing. It's not something that's it's open to everybody. And I remember the first time I went down there, hearing the story, just as a seminarian, the way they tell the story going down there, they don't tell you you're going down there to see St. Peter's bones unless you know what you're doing. So I had no clue what we were doing. I just thought we were going to go down and see underneath St. Peter's, which it's the old city of Rome. And I didn't realize at the end of this tour we were going to go down and see St. Peter's bones. And so as a seminarian, to go down there, a guy studying for the priesthood, to go down there and see that and walk that, and knowing that our faith is totally based on scripture and tradition, that this was the tradition of the church. It's not written in scripture anywhere that this is what happened, and know like, oh, there's this whole other side that is true. It was a very moving moment for me, and it is for most people who go down there and see it. One of the interesting things about those bones is NASA had made a box. It's a clear box that they go in to preserve those bones. And so they're all in this clear case in a box underneath. But NASA had a part in that. Some of the history is, if I'm told, I don't know if it's true, as my history professor in seminary used to tell me, if it's not true, it ought to be. But part of the reason why the Holy Father stayed out of World War II was because the excavations were going on around this time. They were still dealing with it, and they were always afraid the Germans and the Nazis knew what they were doing, that they would come over and take over that to try to help eradicate Christianity. So I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I've been told.
Did the Romans crucify Peter upside down?
Yeah. Well, Peter was crucified upside down, but he crucified him. It was by Peter's choice that he was crucified upside down. He did not want to be crucified the same way that Christ was. He did not want to resemble that. So he was asked to be crucified upside down. But yeah, he was. There's not a lot written about Peter or a lot, but after Jesus died, they always say that Peter, like, he's the rock, he's the first pope, but he also really struggled with the fact that he denied Jesus 3 times, and he never wanted to be like Jesus. And so, although he was Jesus on the vicar of Christ on earth. And so when he died, he was crucified upside down.
Yeah, Peter's a fascinating figure.
I grew up at St. Peter's Parish in Schulte, so I've always had this huge fascination for Peter. And just the fact, for me, it's like, even as a priest, I struggle with the faith. And so it's always doubting Thomas and Peter that I turn to, because both of them did, and they struggled with the faith, and they had doubts and they had things. And so their lives are just intriguing to me, and to do what they have done and what they've accomplished. And they were simple men. I mean, Peter was a fisherman, and that's all he knew. That's all he wanted to do. He knew how to catch fish, and that was it. So they weren't necessarily, Peter himself was not necessarily this huge intellectual person. He was just a simple man, a simple guy who had a profound faith about him. And I am in no means an intellectual person, and so I love him. Yeah.
What does Scripture say happened to Judas?
He hung himself on a tree,
Oh man.
and if you go to the Holy Land now, you can go to where that place is at, where he was believed to hung himself right outside the temple there in Jerusalem, and that was shortly after. I don't know if that was before or after the crucifixion, but it was pretty quickly after he denied Christ that he went out and hung himself. So, yeah.
That was such a unique experience for us to all go down and see Peter's remains, take the Scavi tour. How cool. And even in St. Peter's Basilica, there's popes that are just buried. They're visible.
Yeah, most of the popes are buried and that's what people don't realize. Under St. Peter's is the old city of Rome, and most of it's a graveyard. And so underneath there still is today, but they wanted to be buried. The Christians wanted to be buried closest to Peter, which is how they found where Peter was at, because of the Christian graves. Well, still the same as today. All the popes, when they died, most of them, not all of them, are buried right there in St. Peter's. Some of them, when they're saints or made saints, they're moved usually upstairs to the top or the main level. But if you go down underneath, most of the popes are buried right there in St. Peter's, closest to St. Peter's bones. Not all of them. Our Pope Francis was just buried at St. Mary Major, which is the Cathedral Church of Rome. It's where the cathedral is at. He was buried there, but I think he was buried there. St. John, no, he was buried at St. Mary Major. St. John Lateran is where the Cathedral Church is for Rome, but he was buried there. So he's one of the most recent popes, I think, of our time that was not buried at St. Peter's. But even some of those popes, when you go in there and see them, they look like they're just laying there sleeping. Some of them are incorrupt,
Right.
and they're saints, and they look like they're just laying there, and they've been dead for thousands of years. And you just poke them, and they would just wake up, so it's kind of cool when you walk in there to see the history of our church. It wasn't just yesterday, when you go to St. Peter's or go to the Vatican, you see that. Because even when you go walk to the Vatican, did we go to the Vatican museums when you were? Were all the paintings, the Sistine Chapel?
Yeah, we went to the Sistine Chapel.
Yeah, okay. Then even all the paintings and artwork and statues and stuff that you see there, that's the history of the church. And a lot of those things were gifts given to the Pope or given to the church. And it's just amazing to walk through that, just to go to Rome. I mean, you got the Vatican, and then you got Rome outside of that. And I mean, churches in Rome are like quick trips here. They're on every block, they're everywhere, and they're different churches are symbolizing different things. And it's amazing to see the history of our church. I'm a history guy, but I'm also a very visual person. You can give me a book and assign to me anything, but if I go see, that's a whole different line. And for me to go see those things, it brings the faith alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If I'm recalling, you just walk by John Paul II. He's just right there.
Wow. Yeah.
As you're touring the entire St. Peter's, there's John Paul II. Yeah. He's buried right inside of that.
Right in the door, right to the right. And I think when you guys were there, they had just moved him up. So he was down in the basement. But I think when we went with you guys, he was up top, wasn't he? Yeah. And I think he had just been declared a saint shortly after we had went. And so they had just moved him up. But the last time I was there was 3 or 4 years ago, and there is still a line to go see John Paul II's tomb. Ever since he died, there's always been people who want to go pay their respects to him, and there's still a line that was formed. And that was probably 3 years ago to go see now Saint John Paul II. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty cool to see that and to see some of those things there.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo painted that, right?
Yes, yeah.
Him painting up on the ceilings is just...
And just, yeah, and up, he was laying on his back while he's up there painting all this stuff.
Yeah.
And there was and that's the other thing cool about those things is, right, if you were to do the same, an artist would do the same thing now, there would be a sketch. There would be something to show them, like, this is what you need to do. It was all in here for him, and he was laying up there on his back just painting, and nobody knew what he was painting. It was all in his head. I mean, eventually they got but when he started, it was like, what is he doing? And he had this vision, but he had that. There was no blueprint for him, if you will, to paint that, and it's amazing. And to walk into that Sistine Chapel and know, like, that's where almost all of our Holy Fathers have been elected, the power that comes in that room, and it's amazing. One time I went, it was with a small group, and we had it was when I was in Bishop's office, and we had a private tour of the Sistine Chapel at night. So we got to walk through all the Vatican museums, and it was just our group of, there was probably 50 of us, maybe 50 or 60 of us, and my mom and dad were on that pilgrimage with us, and there was a point that it was just mom and dad and I and one guard in that Sistine Chapel by ourselves. And that's unheard of. If you go see the Sistine Chapel, there's thousands of people in it because you're all tour, but for the four of us to be in that Sistine Chapel was pretty amazing at that moment.
Whoa.
It was a pretty cool moment for us. Pretty cool for me as a priest to see that.
No doubt about it. That's super cool.
Yeah.
So you've been a priest for 15 years?
15 years this May.
2011?
You believe that?
Wow.
Yeah. 15
Shocking
years
that
this May.
2011 was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding.
Shocking.
Shocking and depressing.
Shocking I made it that long. You ask my siblings.
It's amazing the places you've been and what you've experienced in that time, man.
Yeah. I had never been out of the country and I never wanted to go out of the country. I lived the farthest from my mom and dad out of my four siblings right now, the five of us. And I live in Cheney, Kansas, and they're in Goddard. And so, I mean, that's my whole family. And most of the Dewlings, I think I've got a few cousins, one that lives out of the country, a few live in Kansas City, but we all live in West Wichita. So when I went to Minnesota to school, it was like I was going to another world. Mm-hmm. But I never wanted to leave the country. I never had any desire to do it. And I did that 1 year, and then now I love it. I don't know if I want to leave the country right now, but I love it. So it's great to go see other cultures and different things. And so
while working in Bishop Cammy's office, you had a direct role in presenting the documentation for sainthood for Father Capon.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Tell us that story.
So, and it's nothing compared. I always call myself the pack mule when it comes to Father Capon's cause. I did none of the work for it, but I was in his office, and one of the things that he had to do, I was his priest assistant, and so I did a lot of different things. But one of those things I did is I was kind of responsible for a little bit of his schedule, but also his travel arrangements. So when he would go somewhere, 90% of the time, if it was business, I was going with him. And at this particular time, he was going over to Rome to present what we call the positio. It was the position of Father Capon, and it was a thick book. I mean, it was huge. And really, another priest should have went who compiled all the work, and Father Hatzi, who's the one who's responsible for the whole cause of canonization for Father Capon, he's the one who gathered all this information and put this stuff together. But Bishop had to present it to officially. Bishop Jekyll had officially opened his cause, but now it was the time that we were trying to give our position on why we think he should be a saint. So it was all the paperwork to deal with that, and it was a thick book. And one of the priests walks in my office, and this was a week or so before we were to leave, and he says, "Here you go," and hands me this big book he had bound together. And he goes, "So what am I supposed to do with this?" He goes, "Well, this is the book that Bishop has to present to the Holy Father when we go to." And I'm like, "And you want me? You're giving this to me to be responsible for it? Like I have to get it across the sea?" And he goes, "Yeah, just throw it in your suitcase when we get there." And I'm like, "I'd be damn if I'm going to take that thing and throw in my check on to have them lose it, to be me responsible for not presenting it to Bishop to give to the Holy Father." But I carried this huge book, and that book bag did not leave my sight from the time we left the Chancery office till we got to the Holy Father, and the Holy Father wasn't there, but it was his cardinal representative that was there, and there were myself, Bishop, and 3 other priests from the diocese that had went to go to present this to the cardinal, to officially open the study for the Vatican, for his cause. And it was a cool moment to be able to do that. But I was nervous that entire time that I was going to spill my coffee out on the plane or do this or do that and ruin that big document, only to come to find out when I got there, they had already mailed it over, and they already had several copies of it in the room.
So this was testing you?
This was just a ceremonial thing that this priest was giving me a hard time about. And yeah, it messed with me the whole time, but it wasn't as important as he made it led to believe as me going over there. It was important,
funny.
but it wasn't anything that they didn't already have. This was a ceremonial thing. But it was pretty cool to be. I thought it was pretty cool for me to be a part of that, and that's something that I will always remember, is going in there and meeting with these priests and the cardinal, who was responsible for his. I don't think he's the cardinal there anymore, but he's responsible for this whole cause and getting it to move forward.
Can you give us the Cliff Notes version of why you guys believed that Father Capon should be a saint?
Yeah, I think the big thing is all of those, and keep in mind, I had very little to do with any of this cause. Father Hatzi would be the one to really give you the, but when Father Capon died, it was one of those things, his fellow prisoners who were with him and came out of there alive, they're the ones who kept pushing it and kept pushing it and kept pushing it. And it was kind of one of those things like, yeah, okay, but we have, and there was no proof of it. I mean, everybody knew who Father Capon was when he was here in the diocese or when he was at Pilsen, but nobody could tell you what happened there. It was the prisoners who could tell you what happened there. And they're the ones who kept pushing the fact that he needs to be honored. And I think everybody kind of thought, yeah, maybe, but there was still the process to make somebody a saint is so arduous that I don't think anybody ever thought anything that it would. And they finally, some of the prisoners and some of the family finally got to Father or Bishop Jekyll's. And Bishop Jekyll's is the one who officially opened the cause. And after that, they started working on it. Just thought, well, if it happens, it happens, you know. And so they kept taking more and more steps towards it. So, but Rome always said, from my understanding, Rome always said, well, one of the things is you have to know where his body's at, and I think that's one of the things that really held it up was like, as far as everybody knew, he was buried in this mass grave. Most of the prisoners at that time were buried in these mass graves. It wasn't until they started finding out later from the prisoners who were there, well, no, we took him out of there, buried him separately because he was so special, that they found out, well, maybe there is a chance. But still at that, the stuff with going on with Korea to get those bodies out of those remains out of there was difficult. It was hard. And so nobody ever thought there was and when they recovered his body and brought him back home, that was a huge thing for his cause. And so I think there was just a lot of things involved in that people were like, there's no way this is ever going to happen. We know he's a saint, like we know he should be, but there's no way that and Rome can be very difficult with that process. And as we know, it's gone on for many years, but it's still in the works. So,
which is understandable. You don't want to get it wrong.
Yes, yeah, and Rome does it slowly, intentionally, because you're exactly right. You don't want to get it wrong, and you can't declare somebody a saint you don't know for sure. But Father Capon's cause is so difficult because there's no writings, there's no homilies. We have very few things of what he did or said, and so that makes it hard for them to investigate it. They have to investigate their historical matters, and then they have to investigate theological matters. They have to make sure everything lines up. And somebody who was missing for so long or served in the war and didn't know where he was at, and there's no documentation, it's hard to prove all these things.
And all the Korean veterans are getting older, and some of them probably already passed away from even old age,
right?
Or, illness in their 60s and 70s. So time is of the essence when you're trying to get firsthand accounts of what he did.
Yes, and Father Hatzi did a good job going through and interviewing all of these soldiers that were alive. He would fly out and see them and go see. They would come here, and I mean, he and that's what was in this Positio. This book was all of that stuff. And they did a good job now of documenting everything they possibly could, because some of those prisoners have passed away, or some of them are still around, but their minds aren't as sharp as they were. And his nephew has done a lot, I believe, to further that cause and keep it going. So I'm told everything is in the hands of Rome right now, and so it's all up to them. And the only thing we're missing now is they'll have to have two. They have to have two miracles, which they already have the paperwork filed for two miracles that have happened, and they're waiting on Rome to say, "Yep, these were truly miracles that happened." And then after that, one more miracle will have to happen. After that, they say those were okay to make him a saint. So his next step is to be beatified, which hopefully will happen soon.
I was going to ask that. You can get those miracles posthumously,
Yes.
right? Like prayers in
All of them
intercession
are.
of Father Capon.
Yes.
Because I was reading, like, people who are very sick, they pray for intercession of Father Capon, and then somehow they get miraculously healed. There's multiple stories out there of that.
Yeah. I think the most famous story that everybody knows about in this area is the story of Chase Keir, who got in a pole vaulting accident and miraculously recovered. I think he's got 2 kids now and married, but he should have never survived. And one of the doctors that are witnesses that went to the Vatican is a very good friend of mine, and I was just talking to him about this a couple months ago, and he goes, I did do that, but he goes, I don't remember much from it. I want to tell you, that kid should be dead. He goes, there is no doubt as a medical doctor that's a miracle behind this, because there is no medical explanation on why that guy should be living. And there's all kinds of stories. His is the only one I'm real familiar with, because I've met him and talked to him, and but yes, so those 2 are part of the study that we took over when I took that positio over with the bishop. But after those are declared and after he's beatified, there will have to be another one that happens after he's beatified for him to be canonized as a saint. So, I mean, it'll be a while before he's a saint, but there's another gentleman who was kind of in the same track of him, that was just I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago that they're going to beatify him. So hopefully Father Capon's cause is coming up, I would hope. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with it.
I think I saw in 2025 he was declared a venerable by Pope Francis.
Yes, he was a venerable. So after they went through his historical things and his theological things, and they said, yep, everything lines up. So Pope Francis declared him venerable, and now the next step is to be beatified, which is where they'll study these miracles that were sent across too, and they'll study those with medical doctors and medical people and people much smarter than I, and say, yes, these are truly, truly miracles, and he has to have 2. And after he has 2, then he'll be beatified. And then after a miracle happens after he's beatified, then he'll be declared a saint.
Wow.
So the beatification, when they do beatify him, that'll take place here in the diocese. But when they declare him a saint, usually that's done over in Rome.
Gotcha.
So,
man, the things you get to experience in the bishop's office.
Oh, it's crazy. Bishop Kimmy's a great guy. I love him, but I do not want to go back to that office again. It has its perks. I was not made to sit behind a desk and sit behind a chancery, but the experiences I had in his office was just incredible, and I enjoyed it. But it was long, arduous days, and he keeps up a busy calendar, and I would not want his life. But he's a good man, and I've had some experiences from his office that were great. That's where I got to travel. That's where I got the niche for going overseas and doing. I've never traveled as much. I had been out of the country, I think, twice before I went into his office, and I think when I was in his office, I was just in the 3.5 years I was in his office, I think I was out of the country probably 8 times with him. Once with the high school trip with Nance, but the other times was all with him.
Wow.
And it was, and now after that I kind of got the niche, because it's just and most of the stuff I go on is faith stuff, and like I said, I'm a very visual person. That goes to go to the Holy Land, go to walk the way of St. Paul. To me, I learn more by going and seeing it than reading it in a book. Sure. And so it's fun.
I was going to ask you about going to the Holy Land. So did you go Jerusalem, Nazareth, Bethlehem, Sea of Galilee? You saw them all.
And anything you read about this place, most of the places you read about in the Scripture. I've been over there twice. I'm supposed to go back in June. We're gonna have to reevaluate that. But the first time I went, it was like drinking from a water hose, because the first time I went, it was with Bishop and a large group of priests. But I had the responsibility. We all kind of divvied things up. Bishop always celebrated the Mass, but I had the responsibility of preaching at the Garden of Gethsemane. So here's there's a church built over it now, but the very rock where Jesus has his passion is talking about, Father, take this cup away from me, is right there at the foot of the altar. And right here's the ambulance. So you're preaching about this, and right there's where it happened. And you talk about a powerful moment. to be there and say, and it's incredible. To be at that place, and then to go, the last time I went, it was the priest who was supposed to go with us canceled at the last minute, and so I was the only priest there. And so all these places we went to, so we went back to the Garden of Gethsemane, where we had mass at the place where Peter was, the apostles were, where they fell asleep.
What's the Garden of Gethsemane?
It's the place where Jesus was before he died. So he on the night before Good Friday, he took his apostles and he prayed in this garden, and that's where the soldiers came and took him, and so he was there praying, and his apostles were over in a cave, sleeping, and so this is the very place where the passion happened before he was jailed, and so you go there. And then you go see the true crucifix. You go to the very crucifix he was crucified on, and you go see the tomb where he is laid. You go to
is
the
it still full? Like the cross? Like, is it not broken down or?
No, it's still intact. They've obviously there's relics of the true cross all over the world. So they've taken like splinters of it off. But yeah, the true cross is still intact. Lots. I mean, and that's the thing.
Can you see blood stains?
If you look close enough on it, you can. But if you go to the steps, the steps where Jesus walked up to be condemned for Pontius Pilate, they're in Rome now. A lot of this stuff, many people were trying to get rid of it, and so, like, the cross was buried. The crown of thorns are in Paris now. And they got a lot of this stuff away and saved it. But the steps, if you go climb the steps, and if you go to the steps, it's right next to the Church of St. John Lateran in Rome. They were moved over there to preserve them. But if you go up them, you have to climb up them on your knees. And they're encased in wood now. They're marble steps, but they're encased in wood. And there's little viewing holes you can see in it. And there you can see these spots of dry blood that is believed to be Jesus's blood, and you can see, and the thorns. I've seen the crown of thorns in Paris. They're in Notre Dame. With the big fire, they were able to preserve them and rescue them, but they're encased too. But if you look in them, you can see what's believed to be the blood of Christ on it.
Whoa!
Wow. So, have they?
Yeah.
Are these just like kept away from everybody? Like, have they always been, or has anyone ever done any like science on like the crown of thorns, for instance? Is it in Paris?
Well, yeah.
You know what blood type Jesus had? Something like that.
So there's the I'm going to lose the name of it now. The burial cloth where Jesus was buried, where he was wrapped in, the Shroud of Turin, and they've done lots of studies on it, and they have pulled blood off of it. They have done DNA tests on it. They have done a lot of work on that, and it actually. I'm not sure when, but the church caught fire and it has fire damage in it. But just recently, they have done studies on it.
Wow!
And the more we advance in science, the more they do stuff with and come up with stuff. There's Eucharistic miracles that they have done scientific studies on, where like a piece of the host or the blood in the chalice has actually turned into blood or the body, and they've done DNA samples on that stuff and compared it to the Shroud of Turin, which was Jesus, and it matches. It's the same blood type, comes from the same blood, and it's stuff that when these Eucharistic miracles have happened recently, like in the last 100 years, and it matches that exact same Shroud of Turin or the blood they may have pulled off of the true cross, and it comes from the same person.
You're not messing with us?
I'm not messing with you at all. And
what in the world?
It's crazy to think, this is our faith. These are traditions that things tell us.
Where's the Shroud of Turin?
Oh, I know you're going to ask me that. I have no clue where
so
it's
you
at
haven't
now.
ever seen it?
I have never seen it.
We'll have to give it a Goog.
Yeah, see if you can pull it up over there.
Yeah, see if there's a picture online of it.
Because it's a pretty, and they don't, like the crown of thorns, they only bring out on Fridays during Lent. And so I just happened to be there in Paris. We were coming back from Ars, France, and they had the crown of thorns out there. Yeah, there it is.
Within the chapel of the Holy Shroud in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy.
Go to images, Blake. I want to see this thing.
Yep, there it is. And so you can see some of those black That's the Veronica's veil. But on the shroud, you can see. Go to that second one.
It looks like patterns.
But that some of that black that you see on there, you can see that's where it was burnt at. But you can kind of see his face. So it's like if you wrap the shroud in half, you can see his face on that side of it, and you can see his arms kind of.
You can kind of see a body in it.
Yes, and it was wrapped over, like it was laid over the top of him, so it was like folded in half. That makes sense. And you can see his arms, and on this side is his on the back side, and that is the front side. So it was just kind of laid over the front of it. Yeah, you can see his arms, you can see his face if you get close enough to it. But most of those black marks that you see on there are from the fire that happened. That whether they were able to rescue it, but you can see, and even the Veronica's veil, you can see his image, you can see his face.
What's been the most humbling experience you've had traveling to these specific places? Like, what has like rocked you to your core the most?
I think it's probably the second time I went back to the Holy Land. You know, the first time I went to the Holy Land, and if you would have told me, if you would have asked me before I went to the Holy Land, I would have told you stuff in Rome. But when I went to the Holy Land the first time, it was like drinking from a fire hose. You know, you're just taking this all in. You're just taking it all in. The second time I went, and the first time I went, I was with Bishop. It was Bishop's trip, so he was the lead over all of it. He was the spiritual director or the chaplain of it. I was just the guy carrying his bags when he went. And so,
what do you mean by the Holy Land?
It's Jerusalem,
Okay,
Nazareth,
Jerusalem.
Israel, where all the conflict is now. And when you go there, and when I was able to say, like, I'm saying mass at the tomb where Jesus laid, the tomb that we read about, the tomb we talk about, the tomb that is where all Christians believe, and you're there. I mean, but I think the thing of it that really rocked me to the core the most is when I was there in this cave. I was there at this cave where the apostles were, where they slept when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and you know, it was another mass with the pilgrims, another mass we did that day. But when you go to like the garden, you are celebrating Good Friday. It doesn't matter what day of the week it is. It doesn't matter what the liturgy you use, the prayers, the readings you read are from that day. And so like we were saying mass, Good Friday mass, and I don't remember what day it was, maybe on a Tuesday. And we were having a Good Friday service there at this spot. And you're reading this gospel at mass. And you're realizing like, this is where it happened, you know, and I broke down in the middle of that mass, and and then the next day you're going to the tomb where Jesus rose from the dead. This is the spot that he rose from, and you're having mass. I mean, and you're reading these readings of these events. I've read them my entire life. I grew up Catholic, and you know, you read about them, you learn about them, but it's like, oh yeah, that's a fictional place. So, no, this is where it happened. You go walk the actual stations of the cross, and you're at these spots that these things happened. Wow. And as a priest, that's what we give up our lives for, you know. And so like this is what really happened. This is where these are these places. And so it changes. And everybody always says when you go to the Holy Land, it changes the way you preach, changes the way you think about things. And it does. I mean, you go back home and you start reading these same scriptures again, and it's like, yeah, I've been there, I've done that, I've experienced that. You go see the place where Jesus was born. I mean, you were there, and so it changes your outlook on the way you talk about him, the way you preach about him, the way you're there. So the second time I went back to the Holy Land, I think that trip was probably the most powerful pilgrimage or trip that I ever been on. And the other reason is because it was with my parish. So half of the people on that pilgrimage were my people that I have been pastoring at that time for the last 5 years. And we had a 2-week-old baby to an 80-year-old on that trip. So it was this big range. And so to walk with them had that impact on me too. And we still talk about it today with those people. And so it's it's to be there and see all those different sites and all those different things. It's remarkable. It's a remarkable experience to be able to go there and do those things.
What do places like Nazareth and Bethlehem, what do they look like?
Well, it's sad going over there. There's the whole conflict, not just the current conflict, but there's the Palestinians and there's the Israelis, and that's all. And we can go into that if you want to. That's a whole another thing that, and it's somewhat sad because Bethlehem is in Palestine. And so to go, and we stayed in a hotel, and I've got good friends, so we stay at their hotel when I go, and they've become really good friends, and I've kind of kept in touch with them, especially with the current conflict. But when you go into Bethlehem, that's in Palestine, you have to go through a wall, and you have to go in and out of security to get in and out of Palestine to go back into Israel. And so we were doing that area. So Palestine is, it is a third world country, and it's very evident that you're crossing into a different territory when you go through this wall. Because the minute you go outside that other wall, it's and they're all beautiful in their own way, but it's a different country. I mean, I'll never forget going into Palestine the first time, and they had these tanks on top of their buildings, and I'm like, what are these tanks? Every building had this huge tank, and so I finally asked, well, that's our water tank. The Palestinians only get water. So much water a week, and so they fill these tanks full of water, so they have water for the rest of the week or the month or whatever.
Wow.
And so it definitely is a third world country. Where you go over to Israel, it's different, and that's the part that I have grown to love about traveling. Is you're entering a different culture, you're entering in a different, and you get to know people and understand people in a different way than you would if we're Americans, so we're used to doing things. But when you're traveling internationally, I found if you truly enter into their culture and the way they do things, don't try to Americanize them, but you get more out of it. And that's what, like with Israel and that one night we were in Palestine, this guy who he owns the hotel that we stay at, St. Joseph's, and he wanted to take me out to dinner, and I'm like, there ain't no way in hell I'm going to get in a car with this guy at 8:00 at night and being in Palestine. And I'm like, somebody's coming with me. Like, I'm not doing this. And I trust him. Like, he's a good guy, but it's just, even there's always conflict over there. And so it's just like, I don't know about this. So finally I convinced somebody else to go with me, and he took us to a little local restaurant. And this guy, he just kept ordering food and kept ordering food and kept ordering food. And this, I don't remember what they called it. It was a shot. It was alcohol. He just kept ordering it. And I'm like, finally I told him, the bill, I'm full. He goes, well, you still have, your plate's empty. So in their culture, if your plate's empty, that means you're still hungry. Or if your glass is empty, that means you're still hungry. In America, you eat it all because you don't want to insult well, he just kept ordering stuff and throwing it in front of me. And finally I realized, he told me that, and I'm like, the next plate that came out, I didn't touch anything. But I don't think it was a good thing he drove home that night, because there was no way I was driving home, because he just kept ordering that stuff. And it was a great time. But it was an interesting culture that they are, the cultural differences, and so it was fun. It was fun. But they're over there. They're definitely two different countries, but they're beautiful. They're beautiful in their own way, and I don't even know how to describe Israel, because Israel is the whole country is beautiful in its own way, but it's very different from anything I've seen here in the States. Dry, I mean, it's desert land, but it's also got its
free
own
healthcare.
beauty. Yeah, free healthcare. Yeah, but it's very. Yeah.
You couldn't help yourself.
I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry.
So
you brought up the cross being splintered and scattered.
yeah.
Why am I thinking Bishop Carroll has a splinter?
They might. I usually, the custom is if they do have a splinter, and I know St. Thomas does for sure.
Okay.
In Wichita, because I served there, but the custom is that the splinter of the cross is never brought out except on Good Friday. So if they do have one, it might be there, but typically that is veiled or kept away.
Got it.
Except for on Good Friday. They bring it out only on Good Friday. So there might be one there. I don't know if Bishop Carroll has one or not. There's several parishes I know in our diocese that has one. I know for a fact St. Thomas does, but I don't know what other parishes all have one. They're not easy to get because if you splintered the cross from everything left of it, you know, if you
Right.
spread it out. So there's not. I don't know that there's many around here, but I know there's some parishes in our diocese that have them.
And logistically, moving a splinter, it's
Yeah.
pretty easy to lose.
Well, it's just like the relics of all saints. Like we have several relics at St. Rose at my parish, but they're itty bitty. They're itty bitty. So there's just a little speck, but they're put in this case. It's a little round case that they put them in. So it's not, they're not bad to handle. It's like size of a quarter, and probably about maybe a half-inch thick. But that little piece is a speck inside of this little gold medallion-looking thing that the saint's bone or relic is put in to transport. So, and that's what St. Thomas's is in too.
Got it.
So
you've also walked in the footsteps of St. Paul.
yeah, that was my most recent overseas trip, and that one I kind of fell into. The people who I went to the Holy Land with, they had a priest fall out of their Greece trip, and so they called me and they're like, "Can you go?" And I'm like, it just happened to be that I had nothing going on that week, but I think we were like 2 or 3 months out from the trip. That's another one to walk where St. Paul walked. And that trip is so much different. Greece and Athens is so much different from going to like the Rome and Holy Land, because Greece and Athens, you're literally looking at rocks and they're old temples and old things of the Greek history that have been torn down and been demolished. And so they haven't been preserved the way that the Holy Land has been or Rome has been, because it's just St. Paul. When we were talking about Jesus and the apostles, it's just St. Paul.
Can you give the backstory of what went on with St. Paul on that?
Yeah, so St. Paul, he was our second pope, but he left. He was a Roman soldier who was literally knocked off of his horse. And his job as a Roman soldier was to go around and literally beheading Christians to get rid of Christianity, to get rid of it altogether. And so he was going around, if you were Christian, it didn't matter what you did, you're dead. And that was St. Paul's life as a Roman soldier. And then God the Father literally knocked him off of his horse doing this, and he had a great, huge conversion that he would go around. He frequently went from Rome to Athens, to the islands out there, preaching about Jesus Christ and who Jesus Christ was. And he was constantly going back and forth. So when you say you walk the way of St. Paul, he sometimes went by ship and he sometimes walked by land, and he had all that area around Greece. He was converting in Turkey, in the areas of Greece and Turkey, he was converting. And so he spent many years going back and forth from Rome to that area, and we got to literally go walk the areas that he walked and the areas that he preached, got to go see. He was imprisoned for many years. At that time, when you were imprisoned, it wasn't like the jails now where they feed you and take care of you. They literally lock you, in this instance, it was a cave. They locked it, and it was his disciples or his family that had to come give him the things that he needed to live. And so St. Paul's ministry, most of it was done by writings. That's why we read the readings of St. Paul. Usually the second reading at Mass on Sundays is a reading from St. Paul to somebody or something or somebody. Or he spent most of his ministry in prison writing to people about who Jesus was, and that's where we get the writings of St. Paul were. So we got to go to one of the prisons that he was imprisoned at, and spent many years there, where his family was taking care of him, gathering these letters that he was writing and sending them out. And so we were able to experience all, and part of it was he would go out to these islands, and so we literally boarded a cruise ship and went out to these islands, went to go see Turkey. That was another moving experience. Was in Turkey. St. John was there, and so after Jesus had died on the cross, Mary, his mother, Jesus' mother, was still alive, and John and Mary went to live with John, and John was living in Turkey, Ephesus, and so there's a house there in Ephesus in Turkey that is where Mary lived with John, and that house is still standing today. My mom got to go with me on this Greece trip, and so it was a very moving experience to go there and have Mass at Mary's house, in Mary's house with my mother. being there. And so that was another very cool experience for me to go do that on this trip. And so it's yeah, there's all kinds of things. But the St. Paul, we got to go see all the different islands and places he was at, Athens, and I mean, and it was cool just to go walk and see that. But Greece is very beautiful and but it's walking the way of St. Paul is very different from going to Rome and going to the Holy Land where these places are still there. You're looking at ruins when you go to Greece, and you're looking at and they're slowly rebuilding them and refurbishing some of them, but they never thought there was a reason to. And so a lot of the places that you see in Athens and whatnot, they're still reconstructing them or putting them back together. And so it's a very different trip, but it's still very moving to go there.
Does Scripture give us a place or a location where the Assumption happened?
It's interesting you asked that. Not directly, but some people will tell you that Mary was assumed into heaven where I went in Greece, in Ephesus. And other people will tell you that it happened. There's a place in Rome that it happened. There's a place, and so there's no that I know of. There's no the church doesn't say this is where it happened. Like we know where the crucifixion happened. There's no doubt that this happened here. And that's the other interesting thing about when you go to Rome. There's 4 or 5 churches that say they have like the shackles that Peter was shackled in. Now, there's only one real set. But so there's some of these things that you go over there and you're like, is that real? Is that a hoax? Is that and you're right to ask that question. But there's other things that the church says, no, this is exactly it, and this is exactly what happened. This is the real deal. And so once again, the church is very slow to say that, but like those steps and like the crown of thorns, the true cross, the church tells you we truly believe this to be the real deal. So
did every one of the disciples except for John get martyred?
Oh,
for some reason
that's
I
a
thought
good question.
But I could be wrong.
I think, I mean, I know most of them did. I don't know that all of them did though, for sure. But it's interesting because it's like here in the States, it's even the Catholic, everybody thinks the Catholic Church is just the Roman Catholic Church, and it's not. You go over to Greece and they follow the way of St. Paul. So like why they're Greek Orthodox, but they're still Catholic. And so we have Greek Orthodox here in Wichita, very few, but they follow the way of St. Paul. There's St. Andrew, and all of them follow a different way, but the essential way they do Mass and the beliefs are all the same, but there's sudden cultural things that are different. We don't see that much in the States because we are Roman Catholic. We follow the way of St. Peter, and that's the largest denomination within the Catholic Church is the Roman Catholics. But there's also all these different sects of Catholics that have followed a different, and you see that when you go travel the world, because all the apostles, they went off different ways and spread the faith of what they knew. The truths are still the same, but the way they might celebrate Mass might be different. I can't remember which denomination it is. When we celebrate Mass, we do the liturgy of the Word. So we read a reading from the Old Testament, the responsorial song, the New Testament, the Gospel, and then Father gives us terrific homily. And then we go into the Eucharist. Well, some other churches will go into the Eucharist and then do the liturgy of the Word. So it's all, but they're still Catholic. It's just their traditions are different.
Wow.
You go to
and
Africa.
That stems from where the disciples then went after the death of Jesus to preach, basically.
Yeah.
And so they all took the habits of that specific disciple.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
I never knew that.
And you go to I've never been there, but you go to Africa. You go see a church Mass in Africa. Or they're dancing. Like dancing is a huge part of their culture. And so it's been brought into their Mass. Now, can you imagine walking into a church here and everybody's dancing? I mean, everybody would go crazy in the States.
Which disciples attributed to that?
The culture of the African culture. And so a lot of you, even if you go in the go to the States, if you go have Mass here in Wichita versus go to Mass in California or New York, you'll see there's subtle differences in them. And the Mass in and of itself is the same across the board. But the songs they sing, their traditions they might do, it takes on the mass and our prayer is supposed to take on the culture of the people. And so it's the same thing with this. In Africa, culturally, dancing is a huge thing. Everybody dances in Africa. So they've adapted that to be a part of their mass. Now, if you go over there to mass, you're going to see the same thing that we do, but there's going to be dancing as a part of it too. There might be the opening hymn, closing hymn, offertory, that they're dancing. You wouldn't see that anywhere here, and you shouldn't. That's not part of our culture as Americans.
Sounds kind of fun though.
Oh, it is. And that's the other thing about this travel and the travels I've been on. We went to Poland. It's a whole different dynamic to see, and you see the wideness and vastness of our church. I celebrated a mass at Notre Dame before it burnt down, and I don't know French, but they're saying the mass in French, and I am able as a priest to celebrate with them, even though I don't know French, because I know what's coming. I know what they're saying. I know what they're doing, and I don't know French. So it's a beautiful thing to know how wide and vast our church really is, and how beautiful it really is, with all these different cultures and different things.
Wow.
So,
don't they think the Ark of the Covenant is somewhere in Ethiopia? In an Ethiopian church?
I've
Have you heard that?
I've heard
Isn't
that.
Ethiopia one of the oldest Christian?
It's Ethiopian church, Catholic
yeah.
church. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
isn't it kind of a bedrock for
the Ethiopian church,
Okay.
Catholic church? Yeah, it is. But yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about.
Like I don't know specifically, but I've heard things about Ethiopia, how they could have some of the old stuff.
Yeah, and they it wasn't Ethiopia. The Dead Sea Scrolls, where the original scripture was written at, they just recently found that, the Dead Sea Scrolls. I say recent, like recent for world history, but they're still finding stuff with.
That ain't gonna stop. They'll
No,
always
no.
find stuff.
Yeah.
No, one of the trips to the Holy Land I took, they had just uncovered, and it was cool because our guide, who grew up, I mean, he jokes about playing hide and go seek in the tomb where Jesus was buried, but he's a scripture scholar. He lived there. He lived in Nazareth his entire life. He grew up there, and he's in his 50s maybe, so he knows this like it's the back of his hand. One of his things was they uncovered the fire pit where when Peter denied Jesus 3 times, in scripture it says he was around a fire pit, and he was there and uncovered where they believed this was the fire pit that Peter was standing at. And he could tell the story better than I could, but he'll tell you the story on how they truly believe. Once again, they don't know for a fact that was it, but they're pretty certain that this was where it was at, and this is it. And so they've got all kinds of proofs and different things that they believe these things, and it's as my history professor used to say, if it's not true, it ought to be. So it's beautiful to actually go see those things and be a part of those things.
Yeah.
That's amazing. But I think there is something there. There's a church in Ethiopia where
Yeah.
I think a handful of priests watch something around the clock, and a lot of those priests get cancer or get sick due
Yeah.
to whatever they're watching, the radiation.
Really?
Which I think there's always
I've
been
heard
something with the
something.
Yeah,
Ark,
I've heard
with the
something
Ark
like
of the
that.
Covenant having radiation to it.
Yeah.
You've
yeah.
always kind of heard that. So that's what I've heard, which is super interesting. Like,
Right.
what are you watching around the clock that's you're
Do they-
willing to watch it?
Sounds
when
like
it's
when you go to
getting sick?
Ethiopia, check it out.
Yes.
Do they talk a lot about the Ark of the Covenant in Leviticus? Is that the book they do?
It's an Old Testament, so yeah. I mean, I think it would be Leviticus that it's probably.
Does Scripture actually say, like, if you look, or is this just an Indiana Jones thing?
Well,
if you look at
yeah.
it, does Scripture say something happens?
I don't. Not
It
that
could
I
just be
recall.
Indiana Jones.
No, yeah, I think it's probably just that. But
Okay.
I'm not a huge scripture scholar, other than the New Testament, because I've been to.
Well, weren't the Levites the ones that protected or something? I could be so
Yeah.
wrong though.
No, I think you're onto something, but my history doesn't go back that far.
Yeah.
That's more the Jewish custom and the Jewish roots. But I think you probably are onto something on that. But
I don't know.
yeah,
I haven't had religion class in 12 years.
yeah, right.
Has I'm sure many people have tried to debunk incorruptible saints like Saint John Vianney.
yeah, yeah,
Have you've seen him
Yes,
close?
Saint John
What's
Vianney
that
is
look
one of
like?
my favorite saints. Saint John Vianney. He once again he looks like he's just laying there sleeping, but he is partially incorrupt. And yeah, people have tried to debunk it, and there is some truth to some of it. I mean, John the 23rd, who's laying in St. Peter's, he's one who looks like he's just laying there sleeping. Now, people go back and forth on whether he is truly incorrupt because he was embalmed, and so there's questions on whether he was truly incorrupt. St. John Vianney, the embalming process was not a thing back then. And so when you go see John Vianney, he does have a mask over his face, so they consider him partially incorrupt. But you look at his hands, and his hands are blackened, but they still look like hands. And his heart, they've removed his heart out of his body, and his heart actually travels around the world at different times. And you can go see it. So his heart's been, I don't know if his heart's been here in Wichita or not, but like his heart was in D.C. at one point, and it kind of travels around the world. But if you go see John Vianney, he's just laying there, and you can see his hands. You can't see his feet, but you can see his hands, and they look like they're just hands that have turned black. And the guy's been dead for 1,000 years. Wow. I mean, it's like, so yeah, there's people who try to debunk it, but and in some cases, they might be right. But I can't see somebody like John Vianney, how would that happen? How could that really happen? And, you look at, I've never seen him, but Padre Pio, he had the stigmata. So the stigmatas were, he took on the wounds of Christ. So his hands, his feet, his side literally had a spear, and nobody did it. It just appeared. And that's why he wore gloves. But you look at him, and he's been dead. I don't know how long he's been gone, but he looks like he's just laying there sleeping. But they say he was touched by the hand of God because he has this stigmata. So he has the wounds of Christ that miraculously appeared on his body. And so they say he's touched by the hand of God. And so he's just laying there sleeping. And that's what it looks like. And so I don't know how like him and John Vianney, who have never been embalmed, never had that preservation process done, how you can say that they're not incorrupt. It's a miracle.
What a fascinating thing.
Oh, it's incredible. It's incredible. And when you go see some of these saints and go see this, I mean, even if you're not a person that has faith at all, no faith at all, you have to look at that and say, okay, something's going on here, and it can't be. And when scientists have studied it and said, okay, we have no scientific explanation behind this, even if you are a person without faith, you have to be like, okay, something's going on here, and I can't explain that. And so that had to be in the hand of God. Whatever God you want to believe in, there's something more powerful than me that has made that happen. And I mean, for us as Catholics, that's what we call faith. That's what we. So it's an incredible thing when you've seen these things and seen. There's a saint that. St. Janarius, that they have a vial of his blood, and every day on his feast day it liquefies, and they can't explain it. So it's like, just on his feast day it liquefies again, but after his feast day it's dry again, and every day on his feast day it liquefies.
What?
And it's like, I don't care who you are, explain that to me, because science can't. That there's got to be faith behind it. I mean, there's incredible things and Eucharistic miracles and things that are still happening. That we can't explain.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
There's stuff like that just blows you away.
and
The mystery of it.
Right.
It's just like,
right.
what?
Yeah. It's incredible.
God. I got to ask you.
Yeah.
People see him in movies. How does the diocese handle like exorcisms and things like that?
Oh.
Is it a diocese by diocese thing, or is it just an overview of the church?
I'll give you my entire class that we learned in seminary about exorcisms right now. Call the bishop. Don't mess with it. Call the bishop. And that is true. I've had a few situations, but yeah, I mean, every like I as a priest have what we call faculties. I have things I can and cannot do, and those faculties are given to me by the bishop. So the bishop has to give me the faculties to hear confessions, to say mass, to wear a collar. All these things have to come. Faculties given to us by the bishop. Not no priest is given the faculty to be in exorcism in the way that we're talking. Like there's different types of exorcism. A blessing, like I bless water, I bless is a minor exorcism. With exorcisms that you're referring to, or major exorcisms, you have to have the faculty given to you by the bishop himself. So I cannot just, somebody calls me and says I'm possessed, I cannot just walk into that room and start doing it, doing an exorcism.
Once the bishop gives that to you, do you have it forever?
No, he gives it to you on a case by case basis, and you can't abuse that. And that's the thing is, I have learned in my short years as a priest, even as a young seminarian, that it is real. Exorcism and devil, and that's real. It's real. Don't mess with it. I mean, people talk about Ouija boards and talk about that stuff. But the thing of it is about being possessed and doing those things. You have to, the devil cannot just come in and take you. You have to invite him in. And so when we do things like that open ourselves up to that invitation, we're allowing it to happen. So when you start messing with stuff like devil worship and satanic stuff and Ouija boards, you're inviting that to happen to you. And every diocese, so every bishop usually appoints somebody who is like studies these cases, not the chief exorcist of the diocese, if you will. And nobody usually knows who that is. And they keep it that way because that guy would probably be busy all the time with people who think that they're possessed and they're not. They just have other issues, and they do that for his protection, but also because he's got to be able to study a case privately and individually without any interference involved in it, and so to know if it's truly a case of possession. Most of the time when you have that stuff in today's world, it's really not a possession. It's usually a mental illness. It's usually somebody claiming this. It's usually somebody falling into a bad habit that they need to get out of. And it's not truly, I'm not saying they are out there, and I've experienced that, but it's not as frequently, should I say, as what people realize or what people think it is.
When you encounter stuff like that, is that stuff you keep private?
Well, somewhat, yeah. I mean, because you don't want to necessarily harm the person. But I mean, I worked in the hospital when I was a seminarian, and there was one case that the priest there at the time, the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with this lady, and so they had called all these people, and finally they asked us, "Can you go see if," because this person was claiming to be possessed, and we're like, "We just need you to rule this out. Like, we don't think this is what it is. We can't figure out what's wrong, but we just need you to rule this out." And they had called other denominations to come. Well, finally they got a hold of the priest who was there, and I was just a seminarian at the time, and he had been in a talk to her, and there's things you do. I mean, there's things you do to figure out whether they're truly possessed. The devil hates holy water. The devil hates crucifixes and hates the Eucharist. So there's things you can do to figure out whether this person is truly possessed. So this priest at the time had me go in, and he had already done it, and he just wanted another person to do it and to test it, and she wasn't possessed. I mean, so there's situations like that, like, yeah, but most of the time it's a very private, personal thing that it's between perhaps the bishop, the chief exorcist of our diocese, and that priest who might be involved in it. But but that priest who does it has got to be. I mean, some of those, not all those movies that you see on Hollywood are true, but there's some instances in those that are very true, and the devil is real. And the devil knows things, so that person, that priest who does that chief, has to be a very holy and pious person. The devil knows everything about us as well, and so some of those movies that you see and things you see are real. I don't watch them anymore. They scare the hell out of me. I know enough to know, like, stay away from it.
Wow.
But
Have you ever been in the same room as somebody who's been possessed?
No, and I don't want to be. I don't know. Yeah, and I don't want to be. I mean, and that's the thing of it is I still get phone calls like, Father, I need you. Most people when they call and say I'm possessed or they're having a bad time, that they really don't know what they're saying. But the first question you ask them is, well, when's the last time you've been to Mass? When's the last time you've been to confession? When's the last time you've had your house blessed? Well, I've never gone to Mass. I haven't gone to Mass in 5 years. I haven't been to confession in 10 years. My house has never been blessed. Okay, well, let's start with the fact that you need to come in here. You need to go to confession. You need to go to Mass. And then once you start doing that, then I'll bless your house, and most of that goes away. Most of the people who think they're possessed have fallen into a deep sin, if you will, or a dark part in their life that they don't know how to get out of it. And so it's even giving them not just spiritual tools, but physical tools, emotional support, psychological things that are going on. That's all it usually is. I'm not saying that's it. All a true possession case. I have never seen one. I've never even. Well, I can't say I haven't heard of a priest who's had one, but I haven't heard of a priest in a very long time that I know recently that has had something like that.
Wow.
Not saying it's not out there. I just don't want to get involved. I try to stay with, because it's real and it scares the shit out of me. Because I know that it's real. I mean, we do study that a little bit in seminary, in an angels and demons class, because demons are nothing more than fallen away angels, and so they're angels and demons are the same. The demons are angels that have just fallen away from God, and so they're real. We know they're real. If angels are real, then demons have to be real. And so you study it, but that demon side of it is real and it's scary. And so I know enough to know to stay away from it and call the bishop. And that's, if I ever came across a true case, I would, because I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to be involved in it.
Yeah, dicey.
Yeah,
No doubt.
yeah.
How do you handle the highs and lows of the job? You could go from, I'm sure you have, gone from funerals, oftentimes tragic, and then turn around and do a wedding or a baptism.
Yeah.
You have a unique perspective on the full circle of life.
Yeah. And I was thinking about that more today, and I think it's not an easy answer to it. And I think the number one thing about being a priest is people, some of them intentionally, some of them unintentionally, and I don't like it, hold us priests up on this pedestal, on this high pedestal, which I understand. It's not me, Dan Duling, that they're holding that up. It's the office I hold as Christ that they're holding it. So I understand it, but I don't like it. And so people don't realize all the time that we're human too. We're just another human being. And so, yeah, at times that is very hard. And, just a few years ago, I lost one of my very dear good friends to a tragic accident. And I talked to him almost every week. And I remember that day I can relive that day from the moment I got the phone call in the morning until the next week and a half. And it was horrible. But I remember that day I had to go. I was dealing with his situation with my friend, with his family, with his friends, our friends, and then I also had a baptism scheduled that evening of another family friend, really family, my sister-in-law's brother's kid. I had to go do a baptism, and they knew everything was going on, but I still had to go there and be joyful and happy for them while dealing with this, and that happens, not such a drastic thing, dealing with two family situations, but that happens a lot. And I think that the one thing that you realize is this is our faith, not quite as drastic as my buddy who died in this, but when I go from an ordinary situation where I am doing a funeral in the morning, and then a wedding, and then evening mass and baptisms, you're right, you've seen it all in one day. Which you realize, and this is getting harder and harder. I've been out of my parish for 9 years, so I just did a funeral this week of a lady who I treasured. I went and saw her at least every first Friday, if not more. But you realize, is like with her, when she died, she was older, but my job as a priest is to get people to heaven. And so when you look at it in those eyes, when I go to a funeral, it really is, even if it's a tragic death or a hard death, or you've hopefully done your job as a priest, and now you're sending them off, and you're doing that in a good way. And so you tend to compartmentalize, but you can't do that too much. But then you realize that this is what, it's not me doing this. It's like if you type a paper, you're putting the words, but you're using that computer. I'm the computer. God's the grace.
Here's the vessel.
Yes. And there's so much grace that comes with ordination that I'm not saying it's easy to do that. But that grace that God gives you to be able to do that. I mean, there's times I've walked into the church where I'm at the cancer ward dealing with a patient or a parishioner or somebody who's dying and talking to them, and then have to go do a marriage prep and be joyful. And it's like, you're all over the page. And so, and that's the other thing people always say, priests must live a lonely life. Man, there's days like that I thrive to go back to my quiet rectory and mix me a bourbon. I mean, it's so, because it's like, I need a moment just to. And then, I think the most important thing that we do as priests is to pray. And I think it's that prayer that helps you get through all those things. But in no means is it easy. And I think, like, my parishioners who know me well, and the people who know me well, I mean, I can walk into my mom and dad's house or talk to my brothers or sisters on the phone, like, what's wrong? It's like, it's just been a rough day, and they know me well enough. So I think you have those parishioners and those people close around you that recognize that and see that, and you can go confide in. And even your brother priests, like, most priests have a priest prayer group, a Jesu group, that get together once a month, and we talk about these things. And this is what if I'm having a bad day, I'm going to call a brother priest, be like, hey, I don't want to talk, I don't need anything, can I just come over? And they're going to open there. That's the rule, at least with priests in our diocese. If a brother priest calls, you drop and you go help him. You go do it. And so we have a very, very, very strong fraternity amongst the brother priests. It doesn't matter if you're older, younger, tend to be more conservative or liberal. Our priests here and I think that is what makes us so strong. But I think it's all of that. And when those people recognize, Father just needs a minute. And it's those people who are close to you that recognize that, or say, one of my favorite thing and my not so favorite thing was when my parishioners say, Father, when's your next vacation? It's two things. I'm grateful they know I need a vacation, but Father must be getting really cranky and really moody. He needs to get out of here for a while. But it's those people who know you, and it's those people who help you do that and get through that help. But ultimately, it's God's grace. It's the grace of your ordination, but it's your prayer that help you do that, and to know that you are another face. You should be another face for Christ, another face of Christ when you're walking through those situations. So when you're walking through a tragic death or a wedding, you have to put on. It's not me. I have to put on the face of Christ for these people, and that makes it easier to know that, like, okay, it's not me. It's Christ that's going to come through me to help these people. And it's not easy. It makes it easier. But there's a reason why usually your first 5 years as a priest, you're living with other priests, and you have an older priest who's kind of mentoring you, because those first few years you have to learn how to navigate those waters and do those things and not let your emotions overtake you within those situations, because that can happen real quick.
It's great that you priests have that type of bond.
Oh, I don't know what I would do without my brother priests, even the ones I don't like. But it is. We get together really twice a year. We have our clergy conference in October, and then we have our overnight. It just happened a few weeks ago, and we have over 100 priests in our diocese, and they all go to this thing, and yeah, we're there for meetings and conferences, but everybody goes for the fraternity afterwards. There's guys smoking cigars on the back patio, drinking bourbon. There's guys playing cards in another place. I mean, and no matter who you are, how old you are, where you're at, they're your brother. And it's a remarkable thing that, talking to classmates from other dioceses that I went to school with, they don't have that. And they come here and they see what we have. And, I could be royally mad at a brother. But that same brother can still call me, or he can be mad at me, still call me and need something. I'm going to drop everything for him to go help him. And I think I don't know where I would be without that type of fraternity that we have here in Wichita.
Why do you think Wichita is like that? Because it does feel different.
Yeah, I think the biggest fact of it is the brother priests who came before us. In the Vatican II in the 60s and 70s, the church was going crazy, and they were doing all kinds of experimental things and doing just weird, crazy things. And with our priest, and really the bishop at the time, kept us on this path of traditional Catholic views and traditional things, and the bond of the brother priest was huge. And I know something that was taught to me early on in seminary was just that you drop everything for your brother priest, but also that fraternity that we have as priests was drilled into us as young seminarians, and we hung around with each other. We did things together. One of the other cool things is, if a parent of a priest dies, if you're not doing anything, you don't have anything on your schedule, and if at all possible, you cancel what you have in your schedule, you go to a parent of a priest's funeral because they're your parent too. And I think that fraternity is only strengthened and bonded. I remember Bishop Kimmy coming here for the first time, and it scared him to realize how tight us priests were. And he made that comment. And he's been adopted into our brotherhood. It's just, but it is remarkable. But I really think I credit that towards these brother priests that are older than me. Some of them are dead and gone, who have instilled that. And I'm 42 years old, and I am in the older half of priests in our diocese at 42.
Wow,
that's unheard of. I would usually be in the younger 10% in most other dioceses, but I am instilling that in the younger brothers. Mondays I spend my days. Mondays are typically priest days off. We spend it with each other. We do things together. We vacation together. So I think all of that encompasses, the fraternity that we have here. Now, granted, I have 4 or 5 brothers priests who I'm closest to, but I could call any one of them right now and they'd be here in a heartbeat.
Wow.
And I just think that's a remarkable thing that I think keeps our diocese so strong and so solid too.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
Yeah.
You're also the first Bishop Carroll grad to become the chaplain.
Oh, yeah. That's
not great.
No, you know what? I was at St. Thomas for 2 years, and it just made sense that I rolled in to Capon. So I graduated Carroll at 2002 and rolled into Capon. It was your guys' juniors and senior year. And I loved that being a chaplain of high school. And I don't think that I could have ever gone back to Bishop Carroll and been a chaplain at Bishop Carroll. There's too many teachers who knew who I was and knew my family, and I would have had family as students there. But when I was at Capon, it was a great. I loved it. It took a lot for me to put on the Capon blue, but I still have it today. My nephew, who's at Carroll now, and my family still gives me hell for wearing Capon stuff every now and then. But I love those kids, and they were. I helped with the football team there. I wouldn't say I was a coach, but I was out there all the time. And that was probably the hardest time, is knowing that as being the chaplain there was when we were playing Carroll at football. Alan Schuckman, who coached me, was on the other side, and Danny Adelhart was the coach at Capon, both great coaches. And I have a huge amount of respect for both of them. But what made it harder was Jake, my little brother, was on the team at the time, and I was on the other side, and so that made it very hard. On that first game we were at WSU Stadium. It was Capon's home field, and the seniors and the administration and faculty always had a parking spot right next to the stadium there, and the kids knew what my truck was, what truck I drove, and I had driven there. And my family had came and decorated my truck in all green and gold, and it pissed off my students. They thought I had done that and brought it into the stadium. I'm like, no, I didn't do that. And I was not happy with my family when they did that, because it was a tumultuous assignment, but I loved it. I would go back to be the chaplain. I'm too old to do it now. I don't have the energy to do it now, but it was one of the greatest assignments I ever had.
How awesome. I also heard you have
Yeah.
some college records. 12-ounce curls, maybe?
This is my claim to fame. my college, yeah. So I don't know if I still do, but I held records. I was the only NCAA2 athlete in my family and held records in college. And it was, I was in the seminary in St. Mary's, seminary at Immaculate Heart of Mary Seminary in Winona, Minnesota. And we attended classes at St. Mary's University of Minnesota. And at the time they were, it was small, much smaller then, but they had many sports, but they were working on their track team. And so they came over to seminary looking for guys who could do track. They had a solid girls team, but they didn't have any. They had some male athletes, but they didn't have any throwers. And so they come over to see if there's any throwers over here. And I'm like, well, yeah, I used to throw. Like when I threw in high school, it was like more of a social thing. It was not football was my thing. Track was a social thing. I'm like, well, yeah, I've done it before. So I ended up going over to the college and doing indoor-outdoor track for 2 years, and was the first thrower. So I set every record at the university there for track on the throwing. So that was always my claim to fame, was like, this is, and up until like 8-9 years ago, I still held some of those records. So that was always my claim to fame of being a college athlete. But I was on scholarship. They've helped pay for my books and helped pay for stuff.
Wow.
And but it was an indoor-outdoor season, and it was awesome. It was awesome.
that?
I don't want to go back and do it. And they probably wouldn't want me now. Looking back, they're a much better program now. But me and a buddy of mine who's a teacher now, married, has kids. We were the first 2 throwers at that university.
Wow.
Yeah.
How about that, man?
Yeah. So it's cool.
Well, that's about all I had. You've been all over the world, man.
Yeah.
You've seen so much and done so much, you know.
Just
I'm
gotta-
still thinking about that story of the Eucharist being the same type of blood as the
Yeah.
crown of thorns.
There's a
I'm gonna be
book-
thinking about that one.
And
tonight.
that, and that priest with the blood liquefying on
Right.
his feast day.
Yeah. There's a book on Eucharistic miracles, and it's fascinating to see all that stuff and read about all that stuff.
Yeah, that is
So-
fascinating.
Yeah.
Very fascinating.
Yeah.
You got any finals?
No, this was great.
Yeah.
Andre,
appreciate
you got
your
anything
time.
for us?
I don't think so. Keep up the good work. You guys are doing great work on this thing. So
Thank you.
I've enjoyed
We're
it. I've enjoyed
trying.
listening to
We're
it.
just
You got some. I don't know how I got put on here, but you got some incredible people. You
That's
put
what
on
people
here.
always
There's a
say
big
to us.
seat
and
to
it's like,
fill.
that's
Yeah.
what, you know.
So
Whatever.
that's great.
you know, gassing in that chair for the next.
Yeah.
guest.
Right. Exactly.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Daniel. This was great.
Yeah. Absolutely. Anytime. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah.